Canada says a record 7.3 million people voted in those advance polls over the 4-day long weekend. That's up 25% from the last federal election and includes more than 2 million people on Friday alone. That is a single-day record.
Certainly the trend's up from the previous advance polls. And also we have a couple of other indicators. We had 75,000 votes cast in the vote on campus, which was a great number, given the fact that students were actually in exams or already gone. And also we're seeing, a very large number of special ballots going out to Canadians voting overseas. I think that number is up to like 93 or 94,000. And already we've got 20,000 of those back. So, there are other indicators that people are voting, and maybe that will see us through into Election Day.
Now, it is worth noting higher advance turnout doesn't always mean higher turnout overall. In 2021, more people voted early than they had before, but fewer ended up showing up on Election Day. Let's take a look at the CBC poll tracker. It shows the Liberals still on top, but their lead on the Conservatives have dropped slightly to about 5 percentage points. If the election were held today, the poll tracker predicting an 80% chance the Liberals would win a majority. It projects a Conservative opposition with about the same number of seats it currently holds, while the Bloc and NDP would see significant drops. Breaking down party support across the country, BC and Ontario, both key battlegrounds this election, and the Liberals continue to do much better in the opinion polls than they did a couple of months ago. For our full poll tracker methodology, you can go online and then scroll to the bottom of the poll tracker page. All right, let's break down all these numbers with the architect of CBC's poll tracker, Eric Grenier. He joins us now from Ottawa. I was curious, Eric, about what effect the debates would have on party support, but it's now been 5 days since the English debate, 6 since the French. Do the polls on the poll tracker now reflect the debate impact?
Yeah, they do. They do now show that there has been a little bit of movement. I'd say that we have seen that the Conservatives have been able to close the gap on the Liberals a little bit, and we've seen that the Bloc Québécois does seem to have a little bit more life in Quebec after the French language debate, but I wouldn't call any of the movements we've seen since those debates very dramatic, certainly not to the scale that we've seen in some past elections. So we're still seeing that Liberal advantage, while it's a little bit smaller than it was maybe a week or two ago, is still holding pretty firm.
And now we're down to just 6 days before voting day. I guess I can't say voting day when so many million people voted already in the advance polls, but you know what I mean, the official election day. Do you see anything on the horizon that could have a big impact on these poll numbers, which have been relatively stable for weeks now?
It's really hard to see it because we've seen that in the past when there has been a bit of a surprise on election day when maybe a party is beating its polls pretty significantly. It's usually coming at the end of a wave, a momentum building, something that's happening in public opinion. And I really don't think that we're seeing that kind of thing building right now. The Conservatives have picked up about a point. They've closed the gap on the Liberals by about a point in each of the last 2 weeks. If they close the gap by another point, that is not going to put them in a position to win the election because the Liberals still leading by about 4 or 5 points right now. So there could always be something that pops up in the last few days, but you've already mentioned there's been so many votes that have already been cast. It only represents about 40% of the votes that were cast last time. So there's not that many more voters that could change their mind because a lot of them have already cast their ballot.
And let's talk about those advance polls, a record turnout, as I mentioned. And I think, if we had this conversation 3 months ago, you might have told me that, historically high turnout for advance voting reflects a desire for change. Feels like a lot is different this time around. A lot of the old rules don't necessarily apply. How do you interpret this high turnout at the advance polls?
Yeah, you mentioned it there. In a normal election, when you see high turnout, it is usually a bad sign for the incumbent government. It usually means there's a big desire for change. But we've seen lots of indications during this campaign that people are engaged in this campaign. When people ask in polls, are you paying attention to the campaign? It's much higher than it was in 2021. We saw that the audience numbers for the debates were actually quite good last week. So we're seeing lots of indication that people are engaged in this election. But we're also seeing in the polls that there isn't that huge desire for change. And we are seeing that in the polls, the Liberals are leading, and they're the incumbent government. So I really do think that this is an extraordinary election in a lot of different ways. And one of the reasons is what's happening south of the border. That has really, I think, engaged Canadians in politics, and it has gotten them more interested in this election. So normally, high turnout is bad for the incumbent government. I'm not sure if that would be the case in this election.
Our super describes you as founder of the Writ, and so I should tell you, Eric, I finally subscribed to the Writ yesterday, and I've been reading through it. It is fantastic, and I would suggest anyone watching who cares a lot about politics, especially right now, can do the same thing. One of the things in the Writ is looking at, riding to riding and kind of predicting which way that riding's going to go. And I was curious about the accuracy there, because I know that, national polls are fairly predictive because of the sample size, but how predictive is it when you start drilling down to individual ridings?
When you get down to the individual ridings, then you're starting to get into a little bit more uncharted waters. The accuracy at the riding level is usually still pretty good. The past record has been about 90% accuracy rating. But what's more important, I think, is the broader kind of trend line. Because while you can have some errors in some of the projections here and there, they usually cancel each other out. When we're looking at the overall numbers in terms of how many seats each party can win, the track record has been pretty good. And in 2021, it was quite close for the Liberals and the Conservatives. And that's why this election it's interesting to note where the numbers are, because when we went into election night in 2021, the polls were showing a deadlocked race. But we did have a very good idea that the Liberals were in a better position to win more seats because of how it broke down regionally. And that's what we're seeing here, that the race is not as close as it was in 2021, and the Liberals have an even better chance of winning more seats than they did last time. So while at the individual level, there'll always be a few mistakes, I think in terms of allowing us to translate the polls into seats and to give an idea of the strengths of the parties in the House of Commons after the vote is over, it has a pretty good track record, and I think it can give a little bit more light on what to think of when we're looking at these national top-line